On a scorching Friday morning in Houston, Texas, Officer Jeffrey was jolted from his routine patrol by a distress call about an arson in progress. He wasted no time, speeding to the location with his sirens blaring. When he arrived, the scene was like nothing he had ever seen before. A monstrous figure, with horns protruding from his head, was perched on top of a car, eyes blazing red as he bellowed ferociously. His wings flapped powerfully, lifting him off the vehicle and sending him soaring into the air. Officer Jeffrey knew that he was dealing with a half-human, half-monster creature, adorned with demonic tattoos, sporting red ripped jeans and a tank top. He watched in horror as flames licked up from a nearby house. The monster landed back on the car, gripping a rifle as he peered down at the officer with an expression of pure malice. "Drop your weapon, now," Jeffrey commanded, brandishing his gun in the face of the beast. Before he could react, the suspect opened fire. Jeffrey dove for cover, seeking refuge behind his patrol car. The vehicle trembled as bullets peppered its exterior, and Jeffrey returned fire with every ounce of his training and skill. The monster howled as he was struck in the leg, tumbling off the car and crashing to the ground. Pain contorted the creature's face as he struggled to stand, but before he could make a move, Jeffrey's backup arrived, weapons drawn. They took control of the situation, cuffing the suspect as Jeffrey surveyed the destruction around him. The house continued to burn, but they had managed to subdue the monster and end his rampage. Jeffrey knew that he had just faced the stuff of nightmares, but he was glad to have survived and protected the people of his city. He had never felt more alive, and he knew that his bravery would be remembered for years to come. Officer Jeffrey took control of the situation and apprehended the half-human, half-monster creature with the demonic tattoos, transporting him to the police station. This suspect was the most wanted criminal in the world, a notorious serial killer whose heinous crimes had caused untold damage and trauma to countless victims and their families. Jeffrey knew that this dangerous man posed a clear and present danger to the public, and he was relieved to have captured him before he could do any more harm. As Jeffrey drove to the station with his prisoner in tow, he could feel a sense of unease creeping over him. He had faced down this monster, but he knew that there were others like him out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. Jeffrey was determined to continue fighting for justice, no matter what the cost. When he arrived at the station, Jeffrey handed over his prisoner to the authorities, who took custody of the criminal and began the process of bringing him to justice. As he left the station, Jeffrey couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over him. The city was safer now that this dangerous man was off the streets, and he knew that his actions had helped to protect countless innocent lives. But Jeffrey also knew that there was always more work to be done, always more evil to fight. He vowed to never stop until justice was served and the innocent could rest easy knowing that they were safe from harm. With this determination in his heart, Jeffrey set out once again into the streets, ready to face whatever danger lay ahead. Officer Jeffrey had barely caught his breath after the previous incident when he was called to another crime in progress. This time, a group of dangerous half-human, half-monster criminals were wreaking havoc in a Walmart parking lot, setting cars ablaze with flamethrowers. Jeffrey's heart raced as he sped to the scene, dodging through traffic with his lights flashing and siren blaring. As he arrived on the scene, Jeffrey was met with a barrage of fire from the flamethrowers wielded by the monstrous criminals. Thinking quickly, Jeffrey put his patrol car in reverse, narrowly avoiding the flames as they engulfed his vehicle. Abandoning the car, Jeffrey ran for cover behind a nearby trash can, drawing his gun and preparing to fight back. In a fierce gun battle that followed, Jeffrey and his fellow officers took down several of the half-human, half-monster criminals, their bullets finding their marks and bringing the dangerous creatures to their knees. As the firefight raged on, Jeffrey spotted one of the criminals throwing down his weapon and surrendering. He quickly moved in to apprehend the suspect, cuffing him and bringing him into custody. Though the battle had been hard won, Jeffrey knew that the fight against these monstrous criminals was far from over. He was proud of the work he and his fellow officers had done, but he also knew that they could never let their guard down, not even for a moment. With this in mind, Jeffrey vowed to stay vigilant and continue the fight for justice, no matter what dangers may lie ahead. The suspect that Officer Jeffrey had apprehended was a member of a notorious half-human, half-monster gang that had been terrorizing the United States for years. These criminals were too dangerous to be housed in regular prisons, so the government had constructed a massive, specialized facility to hold them. It was appropriately named the Half-Human Half-Monster Prison. Inside the walls of the prison, the half-human, half-monster inmates were kept strictly separated from the human inmates. The guards were specially trained to handle these monstrous criminals, and they took their jobs very seriously. The inmates were kept in their cells at all times, and there were no exceptions. Life in the half-human half-monster prison was harsh and unforgiving. The inmates were treated differently than human prisoners, and for good reason. They were capable of superhuman feats, possessed incredible strength and abilities that made them far too dangerous to be allowed out of their cells. While they were fed and kept healthy, the inmates were stripped of any creature comforts they may have been used to on the outside. There were no televisions, no games, and no luxuries. Only a bed, a toilet, and a sink. For the half-human, half-monster inmates, life inside the half-human, half-monster prison was a life sentence. There was no chance of parole or early release. They were locked away for good, their monstrous abilities deemed too great a threat to society to ever let them roam free again. And while some may argue that it was a harsh punishment, the government and the prison guards knew that it was necessary to protect the public from these dangerous criminals. Officer Jeffrey and his partner Officer Chad arrived at the half-human, half-monster prison. Officer Chad had been injured in a previous encounter with the gang and had just been released from the hospital. They were both there to check on the security measures of the prison and ensure that everything was in order. As they walked through the prison corridors, they could hear the inmates growling and snarling in their cells. The air was thick with the smell of sweat and fear. The guards looked tense and alert, ready for any sign of trouble. Suddenly, they heard a loud commotion coming from one of the cells. The guards rushed to the scene, followed closely by Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad. They saw that one of the half-human, half-monster inmates had somehow managed to break free from his restraints and was attacking the guards. Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad drew their weapons and fired warning shots. The inmate ignored them and continued to attack. They fired again, this time aiming for his legs. The inmate fell to the ground, writhing in pain. The guards quickly restrained the inmate and brought him back to his cell. Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad stayed to investigate the incident. They discovered that the inmate had somehow managed to pick the lock on his restraints using a hidden tool. They made recommendations for improved security measures to prevent such incidents in the future. As they were leaving the prison, Officer Chad turned to Officer Jeffrey and said, "I'm glad we were able to help out, but I never want to come back to this place again." Officer Jeffrey nodded in agreement, knowing that the half-human, half-monster prison was a place that no one wanted to be, and no one wanted to visit. 1 hour later, Officers Jeffrey and Chad responded to a shoplifting call at Kroger. A half-human, half-monster man was caught stealing a cart full of groceries. The officers arrived on the scene and put the man in handcuffs. He began to cry, explaining that he needed the food to feed his 3 little girls and that he had been unable to find a job due to his status as a half-human, half-monster. As they escorted him out of the store, Officer Jeffrey felt sorry for him and suggested to Officer Chad that they could help him rather than taking him to the half-human, half-monster prison. Officer Chad disagreed, insisting that he was a danger to the public and needed to be punished. After arguing back and forth, the officers ultimately decided to let the man go and even bought him groceries to help him and his family. They hoped that this act of kindness would help him turn his life around and prove that not all humans see half-human, half-monsters as monsters. A week later, a protest erupted in downtown Houston as half-human, half-monster citizens demanded equal rights to humans. They felt it was unjust to send their kind to the half-human, half-monster prison for minor offenses. The protest was sparked by the arrest of a half-human, half-monster man for jaywalking, who was subsequently sent to the prison. The community came together to voice their concerns and demand change. The protest was peaceful, but tensions were high as emotions ran deep on both sides of the issue. Officer Jeffrey was assigned to monitor the protest and ensure public safety. He couldn't help but think about the half-human, half-monster man he and Officer Chad had helped a week earlier, and he wondered if there was a better way to handle the situation. "Not all of us are bad," a half-human, half-monster woman said. "Exactly. Another half-human, half-monster man exclaimed. "We deserve the same rights as everyone else. Just because we look different doesn't mean we're all criminals." The crowd began to cheer and chant, "Equal rights for all. Half-human, half-monster or not." Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad were there, watching the protest from a distance. Officer Jeffrey felt conflicted. He had helped the half-human, half-monster man at Kroger and had seen firsthand that not all of them were bad. But he also knew that there were dangerous half-human, half-monster criminals out there that needed to be locked up. Officer Chad spoke up. "I understand your concerns, but we have to protect the public. There are half-human, half-monsters out there who are a danger to society." A half-human, half-monster teenager stepped forward. "But what about those of us who are peaceful? Who just want to live our lives without fear of being thrown in prison for minor offenses?" Officer Jeffrey stepped forward. "I hear you. And I promise to do what I can to help change the system. We need to work together to find a solution that protects everyone's rights." The crowd cheered and Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad left the protest, determined to make a change. One day, the half-human, half-monster man who Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad helped embarked on a space journey to explore the unknown. Using his unique abilities, he soared through the vast expanse of space and stumbled upon a previously undiscovered planet. Excited by the prospect of a new world, he returned to his community to share the news. His kind were overjoyed and saw this as an opportunity for their people to start anew. The half-human, half-monster man was hailed as a hero and his name became synonymous with hope and discovery among his people. As more half-human, half-monster people learned about the new planet, they became interested in living there. The planet had a similar atmosphere and environment to Earth, and it seemed like the perfect place for the half-human, half-monster community to thrive. Over time, more and more half-human, half-monster people made the journey to the new planet. They built their own settlements and communities, creating a new society where they could live freely without discrimination or fear of imprisonment. They were able to create a new culture and way of life that blended both their human and monster sides. The discovery of the new planet was a turning point for the half-human, half-monster community. It gave them a new hope and a chance to start over, free from the prejudices and limitations they faced on Earth. They were able to build a new home and a new future for themselves, where they could be accepted and celebrated for who they were. The half-human, half-monster man who Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad helped name is Optus. Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad were excited to receive an invitation from Optus to visit the planet he discovered. They had never been to another planet before, and the opportunity to visit one that was inhabited by half-human, half-monster people was thrilling. After making arrangements with Optus, they boarded a spacecraft and set off on their journey. As they approached the planet, they were in awe of its beauty. It was unlike anything they had ever seen before. The planet was filled with lush vegetation, crystal clear lakes, and towering mountains. When they landed, Optus was there to greet them. He showed them around the planet, introducing them to the other half-human, half-monster people who lived there. Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad were amazed by the technological advancements of the half-human, half-monster people. They had developed advanced infrastructure, sustainable energy sources, and a highly organized society. As they spent time on the planet, Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad began to understand the struggles that the half-human, half-monster people face on Earth. On this planet, they were free to be themselves and to live without discrimination. Before leaving, Officer Jeffrey and Officer Chad made a promise to continue to fight for the rights of half-human, half-monster people on Earth. They vowed to work towards a world where everyone, regardless of their appearance, was treated with kindness and respect. With heavy hearts, they boarded their spacecraft and said goodbye to Optus and the other half-human, half-monster people. As they flew back to Earth, they were filled with hope.